Hello and welcome to Quadriga. Has cyber warfare reached a new and dangerous level of sophistication? Could hackers and trolls have decided the U.S. election? They tried it, at any rate, according to U.S. intelligence services. The CIA says Russian hackers sought to disrupt the U.S. election with the electoral process with the aim of getting Donald Trump elected. He, in turn, dismissed the reports as ridiculous. Election interference by Russia is provoking unease in capitals beyond Washington, including Berlin. Could Chancellor Angela Merkel, who's up for re-election next fall, be one of the next victims of the Russian hacker band? Could this new form of political hybrid warfare become a major weapon in the battle to win hearts and minds during turbulent times? That's what we want to talk about today with three experts who follow the issue closely. It's a pleasure to welcome Christiane Meier. She works as correspondent for the television channel ARD in Berlin, and she was ARD's bureau chief in Washington from 2002 to 2007. She says we have to encourage people not to blindly follow the echo chamber news of their own peer groups. In other words, use your own brain. And it's a pleasure to welcome Malte Lehming. He's the editor of the opinion page of the Tagesspiegel newspaper. He says after the allegedly massive Russian interference into the American election, President-elect Donald Trump has to decide where his loyalty lies: Vladimir Putin or American democracy and American intelligence services like the CIA and FBI. And finally, Domscheit-Berg is with us today. The internet activist and former spokesperson for WikiLeaks says, before we believe anyone, whether WikiLeaks, politicians, or Secret Services, we should always ask for proof and not be satisfied with anything less. Christiane Meier, what do you think? Could hackers and trolls actually have decided the vote in the U.S.?
It's possible. Possibly also because there was not the same awareness of the problem that we might have now. So we, of course, don't know. We don't know how people get influenced. But it's very, very obvious that, as you said, it has been tried. And it seems that they have much more influence than anybody anticipated. So I think it's really worth looking into that. And also telling people that, you know, you can't really believe what you see. You have to check your sources, even as a normal person, unless you have a really trustworthy source, and that is not your echo chamber.
I want to come back a little bit later to what we need to do about the problem, but just briefly, because we're really talking about two different things here. One is Russian hacking attempts to get into the Democratic National Committee email, for example, and then that steady drip of emails from Hillary Clinton's account, as well as that of her campaign manager. The other side are the trolls, the fake news report, and so on. Which of the two do you think was more dangerous and more damaging in this election?
I think the lies. I think the amount of lies amounted to such a huge mass that people eventually decided it doesn't even matter, you know, if it's true or not. They just believe what they wanted to believe, and if they didn't believe it, they even said, so what, might not be true, but I want it anyway. I want Trump anyway. So I think there has been a very psychologically interesting effect that all of a sudden seemed to have influenced people to a point that they didn't even want to check on the truth of whatever they heard, of news, of trolls, of anything they came across. And that is really scary.
Domscheit-Berg, in terms of the hacking part of the picture, WikiLeaks played a major role. How do you see that role of the platform that you used to work with? Has it, in effect, become a tool of cybercrime? Is it complicit with Russian hackers?
Well, I think it's a little more complicated than that. So first of all, I think if you run such a platform and if your objective is to publish information that has been secret previously or before, then it's very hard to decide that you do not want to publish certain information just because it might not fit your political agenda or so. So I think even if you don't agree with what you publish or the content of what you publish, you're kind of stuck in this situation and you need to put out what you have. But then we would probably have to ask, were there mails from the Republican Party as well, as it has been alleged in the last days? And I think this is kind of what it boils down to.
Apparently they were suppressed. Apparently hackers had penetrated the Republican National Committee as well, but those mails didn't make it out into the public. So, in other words, WikiLeaks took sides.
Yeah, I think that's at least my feeling is it's very hard to say, and this is kind of a problem we have with a lack of transparency there, with not knowing what kind of standards are applied. But I think everybody has, in this election, and we have to face that as well, everybody has been taking a side, and that's the same for every news agency that has been reporting on it.
The side that is now being taken by Donald Trump, Malte Lehming, is that he rejected the CIA claim, saying it's ridiculous. You say he needs to decide which side he's on, but are you suggesting there might have been active and intentional cooperation between him and the Russians? Is he a kind of a Manchurian candidate, in your view?
I have no idea. At least if there were connections like this, they haven't been proven yet. It seems that the NBC just reported that Vladimir Putin seems to be personally involved in hacking things. I think we have to differentiate between fake news and hacking stuff. These are two very, very different kind of things. Fake news is a kind of business. People can do it and earn money by that, because fake news is registered, for example, on Facebook as if it's relevant or funny or entertaining. And you have high communication on it. It's put up in the front where high communication is. You can put advertisement on. So people make a living for creating fake news. People like that exist. Hacking stuff is totally different from this. With hacking stuff, the question is, when do you publish it? And if you published hacked stuff, let's say a day before the Democratic National Convention, then you can really influence what is going on there, because every newspaper is reporting about this hacked stuff. So these are two different things. Donald Trump has to decide. Coming back to your question, Donald Trump, I mean, he is in a kind of dilemma. Saying it doesn't matter how an election in a democracy like the United States is taking place, if there are interferences or not, I just don't care, I don't believe these things. He just should be interested in finding out the truth. Saying, I just don't believe it, and they could be on somewhere in New Jersey, could do the same thing, that might be true, but at least he should be interested in the question if the democracy, the election process has been disturbed by a foreign power.
Just staying with Trump for a moment, because I want to come back to the hacking and the fake news a bit later. We have short reports on both, but just staying with the Trump question for a moment. Christiane Meier, he has certainly appointed a very Russia-friendly cabinet. He is also resisting all calls for an independent probe into the hacking and or the fake news efforts. What do you think? How tight is this Trump-Putin-Russia connection?
Difficult to say. You can only guess. But for obvious reasons, everybody thinks that from Putin's perspective, he's a very interesting person. Putin doesn't know probably what exactly is going to happen. But if you look at the future Secretary of State, who has been an Exxon representative and CEO, that guy has really close connection to Russia. So if Trump appoints him, there should be a reason, I think. He probably wants somebody who is able to negotiate and to have connections to Russia. What exactly we have behind that, if it's really like such a close, maybe even some kind of male bonding, whatever thing, that we don't know. We just know that Putin has a high interest, and that obviously Trump has high interest in the same thing. And for whatever reason, that seems to work for the moment, but I have no idea if that is going to work in the future.
And he has to, his power relies on the Republican majority in the Congress, in the House of Representatives and the Senators. And to turn the whole Republican Party around to be Russophiles is very, very difficult. You have guys like John McCain, senators, you may know...
Still Americans.
They're still Americans, and still they are ingrained in the political consciousness is that Russia is, we have to be careful about Russia, we have sometimes to fight them, we have to deter them. And so there's a lot of Republicans thinking like this, and just to turn them around and say we don't need this kind of inquiry will prove very, very difficult.
Many of them are indeed pressing for an inquiry. Daniel Domscheit-Berg, would you expect that to turn up something conclusive and convincing?
Well, I would hope so. I do not agree with anything that Donald Trump is saying, but he once said that the same folks that are claiming that the Russians hacked it were the same people claiming that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction.
In other words, the American intelligence services.
Yes, there is something to this. What I would hope is that...
There are 15 years in between.
Yeah, but generally, I think with WikiLeaks and some of the dynamics it has set in motion. We require more transparency in the world, and this is it's not a coincidence or so in our time. It's just the world is getting more complicated with every day that is passing, and I think we need a different approach towards how much we can prove what is actually happening, how much we can make sure that we can verify that the information given to us, interpretations given to us via the media, from intelligence services or whoever, that we get a chance to actually see if there is a sound basis for those claims. And with that, I would hope that such an inquiry would actually, first of all, be made, and then also be made as transparent as possible, so that we can actually verify that whatever interpretation comes out is a good one.
But excuse me,
Russian hacking is more than just a CIA thesis. I mean, the New York Times just published a huge documentation about this.
We also have a short documentation about it.
Let's
take a brief look at what we do know about the purported Russian hacking operation.
This nondescript building in the Russian city of St. Petersburg is home to dozens of internet trolls. Their primary task is to spread pro-Russian propaganda, usually on social media outlets. And they do that in a number of different ways. Some employees generate fake news stories. Others post comments in forums and chat rooms. Still others run social bots, a kind of automated software that spreads across social networks by disguising itself as a real person. These efforts at manipulating the media can have dangerous consequences. Earlier this month, a man fired shots at a restaurant in Washington, D.C. after reading a fake news story that claimed that the restaurant was the headquarters of a child trafficking ring.
Daniel Domscheit-Berg, that, of course, was a look at the fake news operation. But taking both that and hacking, can we really be sure that they are occurring at the behest of Russian authorities?
Well, I think, first of all, we're living in a time where cyber attacks are ongoing every day, all day long, from kind of all players involved. So I think basically every major intelligence service that has people that are active in active operations, they have people hacking somebody else that they want information on. So this is not really anything new. The only thing noteworthy here is that something very important or interesting was dug up and put out to the public at the right point in time, so to say.
We're told that U.S. authorities knew about this for some time. In fact, they went to leading members of the Congress and disclosed some of the information beforehand. We're also told that the Obama administration was reluctant to try to sanction Russia, perhaps by implementing its own cyber warfare tools. Was that a wise move?
I think generally what we lack is a strategy, how we as a global community, and we all have to kind of get along with this. It's kind of similar as with the atomic bomb at some stage. We have tools these days that can wreak havoc on cyber infrastructure all over the world, that can manipulate public opinion or whatever. And what we really lack is an international discourse of people, how we want to deal with this. We have a totally unregulated cyber warfare market that is out there, that, you know, credit card fraudsters in the same way as intelligence services are customers of, but yet nobody is really talking about how we want to deal with that. And at the end of the day, I think we all start to understand how volatile public opinion is becoming, how much, you know, disinformation campaigns, information warfare campaigns can disrupt society as a functioning structure, with sane opinions, with people thinking twice before reacting and all of that. And I think we need to start wondering about how we're going to deal with this in a more structured manner.
Christiane Meier, we've just heard Daniel Domscheit-Berg say, yeah, Russia's getting singled out for criticism at the moment, but the fact is everybody's doing it. Do you think that's right?
It might be right, but we know about Russia. For example, in Germany, politics is very worried about Russia's attempts to hack, and not only attempts, but they successfully did so. There's one particular case, the first member of parliament who got hacked, 2014, Marie-Louise Beck. She was a victim of this APT-29, also called Cozy Bear. It's a Russian operation. She was warned by a German federal agency, actually, so it is totally truthworthy. And it's the same people who actually hacked the Clinton headquarters. They know that. They can more or less find out who is behind it. So that is a reason to worry, because it means crucial information can be taken out of these offices. And in this particular case, she works with the Ukraine opposition a lot. So it's really virtually dangerous for these people if certain information gets out. So she was sort of plausible victim, I would say. And that is what worries people, because we know that Bundestag, the German parliament, has been hacked. So nobody knows how much information they got out of it. Nobody knows what they are going to do with it and when they are going to publish it, and if they use it for blackmailing.
Malte Lehming, there is, of course, a lot of concern because we have parliamentary elections coming up in Germany in 2017. What do you think? Would there be an interest on the part of Russia, for example, to see Angela Merkel destabilized?
There might be. Angela Merkel is one of the leading figures, for example, sanctioning Russia for the Ukraine or for other involvements. So she has a kind of stand against Moscow. I don't think that Putin's or the Russian interest is so much in that some specific persons got elected. They want to kind of discredit democracy as such, so that there is no American, European or any kind of dream or people that admire democracy who could go onto the streets in St. Petersburg and Moscow and demonstrate for democracy and human rights. They just want to delegitimize all these claims that they are somehow a better kind of civilization than the Russian is. When he can do that, he reaches his aim. So, but on the other hand, I don't think that the public opinion is as volatile as some might think. I mean, even before the hacking in the DNC in the United States, I think Trump was with 45%. He was not above like 47%, but he was not leading in the polls. But it's just we're talking about 2-3% that can make the difference. But it's just these amount of things, not more.
One thing that both fake news and hacking clearly do is undermine trust. Let's take a look at a recent case of fake news that did target Germany.
About a year ago, members of Berlin's Russian-German community gathered outside the Chancellor's office to protest, following reports on Russian TV that German police were trying to cover up a case of sexual assault involving a 13-year-old Russian-German girl. The report claimed that migrants had committed the crime. Unsubstantiated accounts made the rounds on the internet. There were nasty online comments about migrants and the police. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov also criticized the German authorities for their handling of the case. But it later turned out that the girl had made up the story. Is there any way to stop this flood of disinformation?
What do you think, Daniel Domscheit-Berg? Is there any way to stop this flood? We're hearing calls here in Germany in particular to hold social media accountable, possibly suing Mark Zuckerberg for not taking responsibility for the stream of fake news on Facebook. Is that a viable option for getting this thing under control?
Well, I think first of all, it's technically very hard to implement something like this. I think anybody running a platform should have an interest in not spreading information that is just wreaking havoc or making people confused if everybody can, or if it can be proved that it's a falsified information or so. But on the other hand, I think there's no way how you can really limit the way that information is spread over the internet, and it would be very counterproductive, I think. What we really lack is, first of all, a better political education that people have, and also some kind of a media competence that enables people to keep the calm a little bit longer, to verify whatever they hear from various sources. This is all classic media competence topics, and not just the way how you would filter the internet or pre-select information or whatever else.
So that fits right in with what Christiane Meier said in her opening statement, namely that people need to use their own brains and resist the temptation to go into what's being called the echo chamber, which, of course, is a description for the process whereby algorithms push news to you that confirms your existing biases. But the fact is, sociologists and psychologists tell us people faced with information overload absolutely do retreat into their existing biases because they are simply overwhelmed. So how do we change that?
Certainly not by law. I don't think I agree with you. We will not have an agency of truth or something. What we can expect or hope for is that people are looking for trustworthy sources of information, at least. You can't expect everybody to be a journalist and double-check and triple-check every source. That's impossible. But I think in Germany, at least, we have the safeguard of public television, public radio, of a very well-functioning free press, which is really important because we are checking and counter-checking each other's stories. And I do think and believe that even though you have a point with political education and media education as well, but I do think there are sources, reliable sources, that can actually help.
I think there are two things that should be added. I mean, first of all, we have a global information war. I think this can't be denied. It started, CNN has the monopoly, and the whole world seems to perceive the events in the world like CNN reported it. Then came BBC, then came Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera changed the way many Arabs and Muslim Arabs thought about the Middle East and all these events, because 24 hours a day they just report from the Gaza Strip and the suffering of the people. That changes the perception of the world. This is not fake news, but this is just a different perspective in worlds. Now we have Russia Today, and Russia Today is very influential in Europe, in the United States, and other places. So they reflect on other world events. And just reflecting on other world events means these things are important. And let's say what the guy what WikiLeaks was Bradley Manning. They reported like weeks for a political prisoner in the United States. This is a classical Russia Today story for weeks and weeks and weeks about Bradley Manning sitting in some jail in the United States as the political enemy. So that,
but he's sitting there.
It's happening.
Yes,
Speaking to the role of TV.
But the difference is if you report it once or just every day, then you really focus on it.
Speaking to the role of TV, Christiane Meier, most people do still get their news from television. A lot of them are also getting news from social media platforms, but most of them do still get their news from television. So what kind of a truth offensive could television broadcasters be doing here? I was recently asked by a Russian, why aren't you putting out Russian news for those groups of Russians who live in the Baltic republics, in Eastern Europe, that tells them a different story from what they're hearing from Russia Today?
Hopefully Deutsche Welle is doing that, because we still broadcast in German, which is for many people in the world a big challenge, to put it mildly. So no, we can't. But I think what we can do and what we do is all the television stations, ARD, ZDF, and especially the radios are consistently reporting on events, on local events, regional events, national events, international events. So if you're looking for let's say, news that are newsworthy and at the same time trustworthy, you can find them. But if you don't look for them, it is difficult.
I think if I could wish for something, then I think it would be more transparency. Yeah. We have a trust issue, and it's a general trust issue towards information that we are presented with. So some people think it's the mainstream press that is lying to them. Other people are skeptical about other information. But what we really need, and this is something we hoped for a few years ago when this whole WikiLeaks thing started, is that journalism becomes something that gets closer to science, where journalists that are writing a story that is well-researched, that is true, that is presenting the facts in a fair manner, that these journalists publish the documentation, the documents they have.
No one's going to read
coming along. No, but the fact that it's the same as a journal. If you publish your research in a scientific journal, not everybody is going to verify your sources, but the fact that the sources are there and that somebody could verify it holds you accountable as the person writing that story.
I find that super
that criteria
idealistic.
of transparency applies to WikiLeaks as well. I mean, if we in the mainstream press, let's say like this. If we have a report on WikiLeaks, we have to add this comes from WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks in the past showed some bias in the pop-up like this, so that our readers are informed about that.
And we don't even know if the information we get from WikiLeaks is true. I mean, it could all be fake.
Yeah, that's
so where's the transparency?
Let me briefly
I'm not
ask
trying
you.
to defend WikiLeaks there at all. I think this is the biggest criticism of what it has turned into.
Let me briefly ask you, because we're just about out of time. Our title asked whether the U.S. election went according to Putin's plan. Let me ask you whether you think next year's European elections, including here in Germany, could go according to Putin's plan. Very briefly.
No way.
I don't think so either. That's too easy.
I don't think so either. So at least it will be the public who decides who will be in the next chancellor, and not just Putin. Putin has some tools, he can influence some things, but not in these amount of things.
Does that mean that you think, for some reason, Christiane Meier, that European democracies are less vulnerable than the U.S. one?
I still think we believe in the age of enlightenment, and that means we can think, we can use our brain, and we should, and we will.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for being with us here today, and thanks to you out there for tuning in. See you soon.